Before we get into the playoffs, let's talk about a team that's not in the playoffs. The Patriots fired Jerod Mayo on Sunday night about an hour and a half after their season came to a merciful end on a winning note, which is a unique situation on its own. Let me just turn over the floor to you and get your thoughts as our resident quasi-Patriots fan.
Yeah, use that term loosely.
Yeah, I know. That's why. Yeah.
No, I mean, I think it was a move that had to be done. I mean, we've talked about this for several weeks. That there was just
it's still kind of wild that it happened.
I think I was surprised the manner in which it happened.
Sure,
like it was just rip the Band-Aid off right after the game, press conference, which next day
honestly might have been a pretty good
be done with it.
Good media relations move. Shout out to Stacey James, I guess. Like otherwise, because especially the way that Sunday played out, losing the number 1 pick, people being mad that they finally won a game, like that would have just festered for, I mean, it's what, a 12 to 24 hour thing. It's not the end of the world, but yeah, kind of like changing the narrative right away, going from like, oh yeah, it does kind of suck that we just lost the number 1 pick, but we fired the coach and we might be bringing in a new guy that you like.
Yeah, I think once the connections started being drawn between them and Mike Vrabel, like that I think was when the writing was on the wall. Like, and I still feel that like it's just inevitable that that's going to be the hire, and I don't know if they make this move unless they feel like they have a strong chance of hiring.
That's what I was going to ask you. So, if I was a Patriots fan and I felt that way, that would piss me off. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what are you doing it for exactly then? Like, you only did this because Mike Vrabel interviewed with the Jets on whatever day it was, Thursday, Friday. Like, does that somehow further validates or solidifies your ideas that Jerod Mayo stinks as a head coach in the NFL? You were willing to give him another year because that? I don't know. That's the timing is part of it. I don't disagree. That would kind of be irksome to me if I was. I
mean, I would be more. I like the fact that there's conviction in who they want to hire. You know what I mean? Like I can't see a scenario where it's not Mike Vrabel. Like I don't think you fire Jerod Mayo and then bring in like another rookie head coach.
What's interesting is BetOnline has odds on this, and Vrabel is the clear favorite, -400 right now. This was as of what's today? Wednesday morning.
Wednesday, yes.
Brian Flores is actually the second favorite, 4-1. Then Ben Johnson 6-1. Then Cliff Kingsbury 8-1. And then it gets into a whole bunch of other guys like. We don't really need to get too deep into Liam Combs 16-1. It does feel like there's a course correction coming, and it's almost like it'll be interesting to see like maybe Ben Johnson would have been the right choice in the long term, but because of how badly things have gone this year, you do kind of need to, even if Mike Vrabel is not as good as people think he is, just kind of getting it back to level ground for a few seasons before you can really take off maybe is imperative. The more I think about Vrabel, the less, not impressed I am, but just I think it's probably getting a little bit overrated here, especially that he didn't have a lot of great success in Tennessee.
It just feels like they're like, we need to hire an adult.
But like, so this is the thing, is you start reading these stories. There's a thing in the
or
Athletic.
Somebody with experience of building some sort of culture.
Sure. Chad Graff in the Athletic today reported that Mayo is playing cards on the plane coming back from Arizona instead of watching film. There's the Boston Sports Journal report yesterday saying, you know, from pretty much the jump, they're like, this guy he's just so far in over his head. Like, you're not going to deal with those problems if you hire Mike Vrabel. I mean, you're probably not going to deal with those problems if you hire anyone. But
the one thing that probably got undersold in all of the hoopla surrounding his hiring was the fact, like, his inability to build out a staff.
Yeah.
And I don't even mean just by, like, him being a jerk or anything, but just like not having the connections, which I think was also mentioned in that story.
I was just going to write that, like, staggering when you see it listed out like that.
That there are so many first-year coaches, all just trying to figure it out at once, and you're relying on a head coach who made such a significant jump that, like, it just the volume of connections just aren't there. Like, that you have to already go to the front office and be like, man, you gotta help me hire bodies.
Which, again, I think. I almost wrote this for the site the other day. I just got caught up with other stuff. You can do a typical blame pie. Like, the Crafts get a massive portion of that. Because, like, you just start... We kind of said this stuff in the moment, but you start just retro-fitting it, and you're just like, what? Who thought this was a good idea?
Yeah.
It's not even a Mayo thing. It's like, it's a Mayo thing plus a Covington thing, plus a Van Pelt thing, plus... an Elliott Wolf thing. Like, you needed at least one person in there who's got a Rolodex and an established
I think that's where they're
reputation.
At, right? It's like we need somebody who we have confidence that can just stabilize this thing for a couple of years.
And
right?
I think you turn it over to. As I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, I said I think the Crafts have to come out and say, "Whoops, we screwed up. This is our fault," which, to his credit, Robert did. And you got to just basically turn the thing back over to the football guys.
Yeah.
And that's what I think Vrabel brings too.
Which I think is important. Like, you know, I understand some people wanting them to go with Ben Johnson or somebody with more of like that offensive ingenuity to be able to work with Drake May, but I just think they're at a point where like you kind of got to focus on the culture first and then hope you hire the next Ben Johnson as your offensive coordinator or whatever it may be. Because I think we've seen that with teams across the league, like the Chargers with Jim Harbaugh, or like even like Denver with Sean Payton, and what Pittsburgh has done for all these years with Mike Tomlin. It's like you get the guy who builds the culture, and then you find somebody who's able to work with the quarterback and the offense and get the rest of it.
And honestly, these hotshot offensive assistants have a meh track record of success. For every Sean McVay,
it looks good when it's going right.
An Arthur Smith, right? Like it's so
there's flash to it.
Yeah, I think
it's risky.
I don't know if Vrabel's necessarily the best option they have or the highest ceiling, but I think he's the most necessary option that they can go to. So, you know, that's a sad state of affairs. Anyway, speaking of
real quick though, what do you think of like the idea? Because I think this was also mentioned. Of just like Mayo making such a concerted effort to be the anti-Bill Belichick, because like that was something that, again, like was pretty clear in the moment. Like I still look back at like him spilling the orange juice. Like I know that was like such a stupid thing, but I'm like why? Like, and he also, like, after the introductory press conference had I think, like, a side session to really just, he was just trying to hammer home that, like, hey, I'm not Bill Belichick.
Here's the thing, too.
Went too far in that
There's
direction.
a lot of dysfunction at the end of the Belichick thing, by the sounds of it. Also, good job by Chad. It was in the athletic story, too, where he's basically tuned everyone out at the end. And I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago. It's like, how did Belichick not rub off on Mayo a little bit more? And I think it's pretty clear now that he just wasn't even close to rubbing off on him. Like, you have to get close to something to be able to rub it. I mean, that's just rubbing 101, you know? So I think he probably was like, this thing was super dysfunctional, and I'm going to do everything I can to be the opposite of what it was at the end, as opposed to like the totality of the Belichick thing. So I think it's probably just overreacting to what happened at the end and just trying to course correct so much. He just... I also just think it's possible he had no clue what he was doing.
Maybe, because like if that did happen and there were like sort of battle lines drawn, like you would hope that he would maybe galvanize a small group that would then be able to take the baton and run with it. But instead, it seemed like it was just Kraft's guy got into the role and then was like, oh boy,
here
100%.
we go. This is another one where I like talking about the big picture of this thing, because I think it's applicable to stuff in everyday life. Like you see, which is. It's kind of crazy. It doesn't happen more often because you see it in the real world and business and things like that more often than you do in professional sports. And like I think that's just an interesting. There are parallels to be drawn to like the guy 3 cubes over from you is like that's Jerod Mayo. It's just funny to see that applied in real world. So